I want to do CJ Stroud with Matthew Berry. And I know we talked about this previously, but I want to go through this again because we only did like half of it. And I've had some more thoughts about what CJ Stroud was saying with Matthew Berry here. I thought it was a really good interview. This was done at the NFLPA rookie event a couple weeks ago. But I thought this was interesting because you could tell that CJ Stroud's a little bit worn out here. And I think it's been after a really long couple weeks of draft events, rookie mini camp, going to the NFLPA event out at the Jersey unveiling in California. And I think almost in a way that like when you wear somebody down with an interview and you start to get the truth out of him, he gives some really good answers here when I feel like he's just been pressed into his 18th interview of the day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a blessing just to be able to have an opportunity to get drafted. And
So this was responding to a question Matthew Berry had about kind of a lot of the pre-draft smoke and all the stuff that was going around.
go through the whole combine process and the pro day, even though it's very long-winded and stressful. But at the same time, I mean, I think I have good people problems. Like the things that were coming out, I mean, for me, is like at the end of the day, it would be a bad thing if things weren't being said, good or bad, because shoot, I'm a topic, I guess. So I try to look at it as a different as a way just to learn from it. It's not the first time things have came out about me, so I'm not saying I'm used to it in a sense, but I kind of am. It's just it is what it is, and I'm not gonna try to control the narrative. And I know it was from an inside source somewhere where they were hating on me or whatever. But at the end of the day, man, I'm powered through God, and at the end of the day, it is what it is. I mean, everything happens for a reason, and I'm a Texan, so it really didn't matter anyway.
No,
Okay, so a couple things about that is that we've talked about it, the chip on his shoulder before. And, sometimes the question is always, okay, is it the appropriate size chip? I feel like with CJ, he's really demonstrated a lot of instances where, yes, he's got a chip on his shoulder. Yes, you go back to the Elite 11 camp after his senior year in high school when he had a very understandable and convincing chip on his shoulder, which was he was the last guy invited to that camp. And all these little, frankly, nerdy looking little dudes that were ranked way above him as they go into that camp. And then he ends up being MVP of the camp. Goes to, he was recruited late compared to those other guys in Southern California. Had to bide his time at Ohio State. So it's not just that he has a chip on his shoulder, it's that he's attacked whatever that challenge is the right way each step along the way. So it's not like some guys where, and I don't want to pile on Baker Mayfield or anything, but Baker Mayfield has a chip on his shoulder that ends up leading him to transfer or leading him to lash out or leading him to behave certain ways, whereas CJ doesn't do that. And, sometimes I feel like in some ways he's been judged more harshly for just being quiet about it. And I don't know, maybe it gives people the perception that he's somehow seething about the chip on his shoulder, but I think it's very appropriate. The other thing too is, people question sometimes whether college kids, how the really good college quarterbacks are going to deal with adversity. I think this year at the top of the draft, they kind of like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young both had, I don't want to say the advantage, but they had the advantage of being on teams that didn't win a national championship, that weren't perhaps as good as expected in certain ways, certainly with Bryce Young, but then with CJ Stroud, I mean, he's talked about it. Like losing to Michigan there's nobody like the response that you get from losing to Michigan will never be the same anywhere in the NFL. And I'm trying to think, even if it's the Raiders or one of those other teams, it's a different history and background and set of expectations. Like you go in college football where you're winning, when you're a really good team, you're winning 90% of your games all the time. And like the expectations are huge. It's just not like that in the NFL. And I think CJ Stroud in a lot of ways has already faced a tougher grindhouse than he necessarily might face in the NFL. Yes, there's more national notoriety. There's more media coverage. There's higher ratings on television, but it's different than that college environment. So I feel just fine about that part of it with CJ.
Smart guy once told me pressure's a privilege. Right?
For sure.
Pressure's a
Guys
privilege.
like us in our position, we want pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah, my team, we weren't worried at all. We were actually kind of relaxed the whole time. At least I was. And I heard nothing but great things from teams. I didn't hear anything negative, really. So
it was more like just social BS,
yeah,
which is
great. The people who aren't making the picks have the most to say. So.
Well, what are the
Yeah, and he like I don't know, like I've told you before, I really he's got all the little cliches built in to where it's part of his thinking, which is good. Like it's I don't care if it's sometimes a boring bite or anything, but keeping the main thing, all that stuff. Talking about, basically if you don't have any, if you the word the phrase from the song is, if you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping, which is true. If you have no critics, then you're likely doing nothing noticeable in the world. So he's got a good perspective on that.
Texans getting in CJ Stroud?
Against CJ Stroud. So
right.
Just a man of God, a person who's going to come in and lead every day. Going to work his tail off to win games, and going to do anything in his power to be a great, not only football player, but a man in the community, to represent the Texans organization as best as I can. So I'm very excited that I already got to get to work with some of the guys, building a great relationship with everybody. I mean, it's really just trying to build this thing up, man. I definitely think we have a great young team with some young pieces, but we have some vets we brought in that are going to be a key point while we're going to win games. And the best thing about it for me, just bringing myself, is just I'm going to be myself, and that's wholeheartedly. So I can't wait to finally get to the season and play. But for right now, we're just building chemistry, camaraderie, trying to build that brotherhood, because the closest teams are the best teams. So I love.
There you go. Like the closest teams are the best teams. Like he's got don't take this the wrong way, everybody. I'm about to say something because it was something that I was genuinely impressed by with Jack Easterby. I'm sorry, was that he had so many little phrases that he could just pepper in conversation like that part did genuinely impress me. I feel like to have those at the ready to go, it's like kind of you're eating your own chow, as like I think a phrase they use in the military, where you're actually living by the words that you're trying to spew out. But and the other part of that, which I would say, again, let's separate this from Jack Easterby 100% and completely. And I don't take this with a grain of salt, what I'm about to say. I don't, because I never want to get too far into like trying to criticize somebody's faith or laud it or anything. We've all been in trouble before when we've lauded somebody's faith or their piety, and then you find out other things about it. I think with CJ, there is a part of him where he does, he credits God a lot, and he talks about believing in God and all that. But I've never once gotten the sense that it's like in a self-promotional way, or in a way that's like it's very matter of fact the way he is about other things. So I don't want to make too big a deal out of that. It's just I think there's that sometimes with football players or anybody else, people very much fall for the flashy and they fall for the self-promotional stuff. And CJ, like, if anything, maybe at times he's a victim of not being self-promotional enough. But again, over time, that starts to pay off,
Falcons Vic, but I really was pretty young when he was playing for them.
So we had talked about this before, but we can go over it again. And this is the part again that I feel old as hell, because he was a fan of Philadelphia Vic. Why? Well, because Michael Vick was drafted by the Falcons 3 months before CJ Stroud was born. So that's, you want to talk about feeling old. Yeah. He didn't really watch Michael Vick play at Atlanta at all. And he would have been like 8, 9, 10 years old whenever Michael Vick got to Philadelphia, by whatever means he got up there. It was that was the Michael Vick he knew, who was a much more complete football player.
My favorite Michael Vick was the Eagles.
Sure.
Where he was throwing the ball really, really well. So, yeah, people always kind of get them. But I modeled my game after him in a sense, but it was really his passing style. Like, he had a cannon that nobody really gave him credit for.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it wasn't, I know I can't run like him, and I don't think he can throw like me. But
very few people in the world can run like 100%.
him. 100%. Yeah. So, it's probably been 3 of them now. I feel like Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson are probably the only 2 right now in the league that can run like him. But, yeah, man, it was more so like an inspiration thing, that he just inspired me as a kid just to want to be a NFL quarterback.
That's interesting too, because you go around the Southeast, or I guess because I've been in the Southeast more than anywhere else. Well, from Houston to the Southeast. But yeah, the number of Vic jerseys there used to be when Vic was playing was pretty extreme, at least that's where I was. And I don't know if it was as much like that on the West Coast, but he was like just there was so many kids that just flat out loved Mike Vick that it would be interesting to see how he would play if Michael Vick could have played in the era of the zone read, and a few other guys like that. It could have been something kind of freakishly good because he did have a strong arm. He wasn't a ball placement specialist the way that CJ Stroud is. But I also he's able to talk about Mike Vick and is far enough removed from it that like people haven't tried to make a big deal out of that or anything. We've fallen. I think we've gone beyond that.
Really just keeping the main thing.
Okay, so he was asked about the advice that he got from Tom Brady and Travis Scott at that NFLPA event. Well, at the Fanatics lunch that they had.
Everything that you're wanting to happen, if you take care of business in the locker room, in the weight room, in the film room, in the practice field, everything's gonna take care of itself. So a lot of other things, but man, that was one part that I definitely needed to hear, and was very grateful for him taking all his time.
What are the Seahawks?
So keeping the main thing. We've heard that a few times now, just in various forms, and that was actually the advice. That was the advice from Travis, I believe, and I'm sure Brady said it at some point. But like that's like one of the simplest pieces of advice you can give to an NFL rookie that needs to be said over and over and over again, because these guys I remember having a conversation with a rookie once, a high draft pick, that like midway through his rookie season, I'm sitting with him on a Saturday night before we're about to watch film, and he's telling me about this company that he had started and another company that he was thinking about starting. And he wasn't an impressive draft pick up to that point. And I'm like, man, listen, I got to be honest with you. Like, you can have all this stuff that you're talking about at any point in your life if you just focus right now on playing football. But the issue sometimes is somebody will get in their ear and explain to them that like you need to strike while the iron is hot and you need to do this and do that while your name is big. And some of that is true, but you need to do it in a very low energy, low output fashion. There's certain things you can do for yourself where you shouldn't have to be thinking about it or hustling or turning it into a second job. And yet some guys just they fall prey to that notion that you're going to be a multimedia super magnate or something. And CJ's, I think through NIL, this is where NIL is going to pay off. I think CJ's already dealt with that some. He's already talked about when he had to pump the brakes on some of these endorsements that were coming at him because he wanted to keep the main thing. So it's like yet another thing that I don't worry about with CJ Stroud.
Getting in JSN.
Franchise.
He asked him what are the Seahawks getting in Jackson Smith and Jigba?
Receiver, somebody who they're gonna love to have, not only on the field but off the field. I definitely think that he's just a great human being, but he's a dog. Like, it's somebody that I'm gonna miss playing with, lining up with, because one thing, he's gonna have his quarterback's back no matter what, and he's gonna make plays for him. So just excited to see that trio over there play with Geno. I think Geno's a great quarterback. DK, Tyler, I definitely think that they're going to be a great trio, and I think not too long Jackson to be, if not the best receiver in the league, one of them. So
this is going to sound sort of simple and stupid, but I do appreciate that CJ Stroud seems like a genuine football fan. And remember Ryan Tannehill famously didn't know what the divisions were in that Hard Knocks Miami, which, man, I'm thinking back on it. Like, that's pretty extreme, probably, amongst quarterbacks at least. But I don't think it's necessarily that uncommon. There are a lot of guys that aren't really huge football fans. They've just been good at football, where CJ's been pretty obsessed with it for a long time. So, like, it sounds simple, but I've heard him talk about various teams now, and he'll kind of reel off the names of not just the Geno Smiths or DK Metcalfs or Tyler Lockett's, but some of the other lesser known guys. And he's doing it like when not having been prepped for that team. So I appreciate that out of him, that he's like a genuine football fan, I think.
The rumor is that you went to, after you got drafted by the Texans, you went to the Texans brass and said, hey, go get me Tank Dell. Go draft Tank Dell. So is that
Okay, so yeah, the rumor is, like, the story was reported as CJ Stroud went to Nick Caserio and basically said, "Hey, yeah, I know you guys just drafted me, but this is what you got to do. You got to go draft Tank Dell." I think CJ gives a better representation of how it all went down.
true? And why Tank Dell? What'd you see in Tank that you wanted to make sure he was your teammate?
Yeah, Tank is not only an amazing player, amazing person as well. And I know that we had moved up to get Will. And of course, Jackson, I thought me and him would go 2-12. But when they moved up, I was super happy because I wanted Will too. Will was amazing in the process. I got to meet him a couple times, and it was just really helpful for me to have somebody like Will around. And I got to talk to Nick, our GM, and he was asking me some questions about Tank. He was like, "Do you like him?" I was like, "Yeah, I love him. Like, he's a great route runner, good dude, can catch really well. He's a big radius, fast guy, can take the top off." And I was like, "Yeah, like I'll be happy with that." So he was like, "Call him." So I called Tank and chopped it up, and he was hoping that to go to the Texans, and then Nick gave him the call probably like a couple hours later, and then he ended up becoming the Texans. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so, like, I mean, that's pretty much the way that Nick described it too, which was they drafted CJ Stroud, and after they draft him, they're talking to him a little bit about, like, various guys. They brought up several names to CJ Stroud, and you know, in the meanwhile, Tank Dell was DMing or messaging or just publicly messaging the Texans saying, "Hey, come get me." So I think from Tank Dell's perspective, it was hey, CJ Stroud called him, and you know, a little while later, the Texans draft him, and in his mind, and I think the way he described it, it probably felt like CJ Stroud telling the Texans to go get him. The way it was described both there and by Nick Caserio was that they asked CJ Stroud about Tank Dell, what his impressions were. You know, that's understandable, new information they could be getting from him. And then they had CJ call Tank Dell to also not just talk to him, but find out perhaps what Tank Dell was hearing from other teams, which I tried to put myself in CJ Stroud's shoes there. And I wonder, like, it's almost like they're kind of asking you to be a little bit of like a secret agent, like first day on the job before you've even signed the contract, all for the greater good. Any of us that grew up in the Cold War can justify it immediately because it's all for the greater good. Ends justifies the means. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll spend whatever we need to spend on $700 hammers at the Pentagon if it means beating the Ruskies or Indianapolis, as it were. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of what was probably a pretty long video because I tend to go long. Really appreciate you hanging out with me, and I would love if you would like and subscribe. I do a whole lot of NFL content, whole lot of Houston content. I played 10 years in the NFL. Now I do a sports radio show in Houston. So a whole lot of all of that, plus more interviews as we move along. We'll be adding topics. I just started doing YouTube a few months ago, and I'm absolutely loving it. So thank you for the support.